Years ago, I went to visit my grandfather and saw that he had a CD player that was covered with about a centimeter of dust on top. And I asked him about it. Don't you like listening to music? And he said, I love listening to music. I go to the symphony all the time, enjoy chamber music. And I said, well, this is the same thing, except you can listen to music while you do other things. And he said, no, I need to concentrate while I listen to music. That's how I appreciate it. This is a picture of me outside of his house, slightly different time. Although I didn't quite respect reverence that he felt towards single-mindedly focusing on listening to music, clearly I had my own single-minded focus on engaging in the media that I enjoyed. This might even be what I wore to see Superman in the movie theater for the first time. So today everyone talks about the iPad, the latest, greatest thing. Only a few years before the iPad came out, people were talking about the iPod. In 2006, the iPod could finally play video at almost TV quality resolution, which was very exciting. But if you step back just a little bit further in time to 1992, that was when Apple first released QuickTime. What I'm showing you is one of the first QuickTime clips ever. Okay, this is from Apple's archives. The film is called Making Toast. And the point of it is simply that putting video on a computer seemed magical enough. No one just knew what to do with it yet. But once you have the tools, people can start exploring them. So in the mid-90s, in 1995, I created my first website, which was called The New Venue. And the whole purpose of it was to show movies made specifically for viewing on the internet. I found a grant that was available at the end of 95. I got it at the beginning of 96. I spent a while sort of cultivating the interface and so on. Back at that time, a web page was either gray or it was a very literal metaphor. So rather than taking a picture of a movie theater, I explored something slightly different, which was filling your screen with a movie made specifically for the internet. Because I figured in a few years' time, people would be watching a lot of video online. I originally did this project simply because I wanted to make short films myself, and I didn't know where to show them. I thought you could send films to film festivals, but that isn't necessarily enough. So I created a forum for myself and also for other people to show their own work. And it was exciting at first. As an offshoot of that project, I ran the first film festival for the Palm Pilot. Those movies had to be silent, black and white, and no longer than 12 seconds because it would crash the machine. So we called it the Aggressively Boring Film Festival. It was a really fun little experiment. The films weren't actually good. They were just kind of paving the way for something more. And sometimes that's all you really need. So after doing those two projects, I had strayed so far away from making movies that I needed to go back and start making films for myself. Of course, I was in my mid-20s, and I had put all this effort into these very early experimental film platforms, and where I loved the idea of taking the platform itself and treating that as its own canvas with its own texture and saying, okay, what's unique for the web? What's unique for a handheld? There wasn't a lot of money in that, so I couldn't afford to work with actors. So I thought, well, what's the next best thing? I'll work with vegetables. I decided I was going to tell the story of Oedipus in 8 minutes, performed by vegetables. But most importantly, it had to look like Ben-Hur. Because if you're going to make a vegetable movie, you can't do CG, and it's got to be in CinemaScope. I lucked out because digital DSLRs just hit the market. For the first time, you could shoot a movie with a still camera, and those frames could be output to film, and that's what I did. Pose this question of, if this is true, what else is true? If Oedipus dresses like something in the desert, then what does he dress like when he's king? And how do you build the sets? What steps are involved in creating this entire world? I worked with 100 people to make this film over 2 years. I had no idea. I didn't want to be an animator. I just wanted to tell a story. And the tools that I used just happened to be the tools at hand. The most distressing part of the project was when there was a supermarket strike in the middle of production. And I went to go casting, and I had to cross a picket line, and this guy stopped me, and he's like, hey, what do you think you can get at this Vons that you can't get at the Food for Less down the street? And I said, look, I've been to the Food for Less, I've been to the Ralphs, I've been to the pavilions. I'm looking for an onion about this big with a little pointy thing on its head that can fit in this toga. And the picket line moved aside. They let me through. And I'll show you about a minute and a half of Oedipus.
Who art thou who does not kneel before the king of Thebes?
My name is Oedipus.
Oedipus. I had a son called Oedipus, destined to kill his father and wed his very mother. But he was...
He was what?
killed.
Killed?
Killed. As you shall be.
So sometimes what it means to be creative is to do something that simply has no point. Right after Oedipus, I suddenly had an agent and was pitching to do films, which is something that I actually always wanted to do. I met the people who ran TED. TED had been going on since 1984. This is a shot from the very first conference. 20 years later, it didn't look that different. In 2005, TED added a third camera, which was sort of an overview of male pattern baldness in the room, but it wasn't doing that much more. And so I said, if you're going to have these remarkable people talking about the ideas that inspire them the most, you can't film it like a high school play. And so we shot TED like it was a cinematic experience and light it so that it creates drama and bring in multiple camera angles. And that was the element that I brought to TED. There was a writer's strike in Hollywood right when we switched to HD. And so nothing was being shot. So I brought out all of these cinematographers who normally do features and television and commercials and music videos of the highest caliber. And I was like, you guys want to shoot TED? They're like, yeah, sure. And they keep coming back, some of my heroes. And the point of all of this was so that we could give everyone the best seat in the house, whether they're in the room live or whether they're watching it at home through their computer or watching it in another place. You probably can't tell from this picture, but these guys are in outer space. They're flying 17,000 miles an hour, 200 miles above the Earth in the space station. We actually made an arrangement to shoot a talk from the space station that would be shown at TED. The only problem is they weren't used to shooting themselves in a way that was very dramatic. So I sent a bunch of reference images like I would on any film project I do. So I said, here are some shots that kind of show how space is, ideally filmed. And boom, we get something like this. Katie Coleman ran a 2-camera shoot from the space station. Of course, the whole time I was working at TED, I still wanted to cultivate my skills as a filmmaker. So I've constantly been doing other projects. While I was at TED, the projects I took on, involved romantic comedy about a girl who falls in love with her imaginary friend from when she was a little girl. And then I started experimenting more with, what could I do with technology on the side? I can't bring together 100 people like I did for Oedipus, but is there something that I could do strictly on my own? There was a band that I knew in the East Village in New York, and they had this great gritty aesthetic, very early 80s. And so I wanted to do a video for them that was reminiscent of concert flyers you'd see plastered up all over the city. So we shot a quick music video, and then I went out and I printed 4,200 sheets of paper of each frame, and I went and I rephotographed them so that it would have that visual texture, which is interesting, especially in an era of digital video, that materiality would have to take this new form. I tried other things like having a flash mob of zombies performing yoga as another project, because I'd always wanted to be in a flash mob. My most recent and final project that I completed was taking from 2 sources. One of them is the notion of crowdfunding, and the other is serialized content online. with a very talented journalist a project called We Are All Radioactive, where we went to Japan and explored the aftermath of the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown. Everything that I did uses technology simply as a tool. I think it's quick to either dismiss technology or to embrace technology for the sake of technology. What's really key is to just regard technology as a tool, to embrace the constraints that it gives you, and to tell new kinds of stories that harness that. I think in the future, as more and more people have access to cameras with full quality video, everyone will have a certain savviness, and it'll come down to the storytellers and the curators and the creators who will really push those boundaries. And I can't wait to see what people like that do in the future. Thank you.